Hey there, viewers. After years of silence from the bench, a 46-year-old federal judge has finally spoken out about Diddy, and what they revealed is sending shockwaves through the legal world. This isn't just opinion, it's coming straight from inside the system. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The audio tape that wasn't evidence. My name's Mira. I'm 26, give or take, and I never wanted to be here forever. This place. Gray floors, busted overhead lights, paper dust that crawls into your lungs and stays. It was just supposed to be a starting point, a stepping stone. I took the job at the Southern District Archives because they offered dental, and I could keep my headphones in while I worked, so long as nobody important was walking through. I didn't go to law school. I didn't intern at the Capitol. I just know how to organize things. That's what I do. I file, I digitize, I shred what they say is okay to shred, and I keep my head down. The basement where they keep the sealed evidence is colder than upstairs, not because of AC, but because it's surrounded by concrete on all four sides. We call it the meat locker, even though there's nothing in there but cabinets, tagged boxes, and that sharp, quiet hum from the servers against the back wall. It's always the same. Walk in, scan your badge, wheel a box to your desk, and sit there for 8 hours flipping through files to see what can be backed up to the court's cloud system. Most of it's just old sentencing paperwork, tax fraud cases, and stuff from the early pandemic days when everyone thought Zoom court was a good idea. I was about 4 weeks into the job when I found the box. It was wedged behind a rolling cart filled with moldy banking receipts from a drug case in Jersey. It didn't have a barcode like the others, just a faded paper tag tied to the handle with red twine. It read, "Confidential, JSC, 392, audio, partial. Nothing else, no case number, no docket, no judge's name." I should have flagged it, should have walked it straight to Valerie, my supervisor, but honestly, we find weird stuff all the time. Misfiled tapes, thumb drives from the early 2000s. Last week I found a plastic bag with hair samples that had no label. Valerie laughed it off and tossed it in the incineration bin. So I did what I normally do. I set the box on my desk, put on my gloves, and pulled the lid off. Inside was a manila folder, one single mini cassette, and a typed sheet that looked like it had been torn out of a typewriter 30 years ago. Playback authorized for chain of custody verification only. It was unsigned. Her playback station is in the corner, next to the microwave that smells like old soup. I popped the cassette into the digital converter. The tape whirred a few times, then clicked. Static poured out first, hollow and soft, like breathing through a rag. Then came the voice. I never wanted to see him again. The voice was male, deep, older, maybe 40s. He wasn't addressing anyone directly. He wasn't reading into a microphone like a courtroom deposition. He was talking like he was alone. Like the recorder was a mirror, but they placed him in my courtroom and I had to watch him smile. I had to call him sir. I sat up straighter. Something in my chest went still, like a needle had pricked it from the inside. I glanced at the time code. Only 17 minutes total. I turned up the volume. He didn't say Diddy, he didn't say Puff Daddy, he said Sean Combs 3 times, clear as day. He talked about a sealed motion filed under judicial discretion, talked about reviewing the playback protocol and referencing something called Trial 7. He said the first time he ruled on it, he thought it was metaphor. The second time, he realized it was script. And by the third time, the tape cut. Just like that, it didn't end, it stopped, mid-sentence. I pressed rewind, tried to load it again. Nothing. The converter flashed an error, tape corrupted. My hands were shaking a little, not out of fear, I just didn't understand what I'd heard. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't evidence. It was a judge, someone federal, talking like he was trapped in his own courtroom, like the proceedings weren't for justice, but rehearsal. I looked around the room. Nobody was watching me. Valerie was upstairs in the staff room. Reggie was cleaning the copy machine. I knew I had maybe 5 minutes before someone asked why I wasn't moving paper. So I logged the tape as unplayable format and put it back in the box. But I didn't reshelve it. I tucked it in my drawer. I needed to think. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice in my head, the calm way he said they placed him in my courtroom. They, like it was bigger than the court, bigger than the law. And I couldn't help thinking about how calm he sounded. He wasn't angry. He wasn't scared. He was tired. I came back early the next day, hoping I could copy the files somehow, maybe record it with my phone, maybe open the converter again and try another device. But the box was gone. So was the tape. So was the folder. Even the red twine tag had vanished. I checked the reshelving logs. Nothing. No barcode. No chain of custody. Nothing was moved out under my name or anyone else's. I asked Valerie about it. She squinted at me like I'd asked her if ghosts had access badges. Box marked JSC. No, we don't handle sealed JSC records down here. That's federal witness stuff. We're not cleared for that. But I found one yesterday. You probably misread the tag. Happens all the time. She smiled, then gave me a coffee coupon like I was a child who'd scraped her knee. That afternoon, my clearance dropped. The next time I logged in, I no longer had access to the drive that connected to tape digitization. I was assigned to municipal case shredding, 3 floors up, away from the locker, away from everything. I didn't argue. I just nodded, because I knew how things worked here. You ask too many questions, you get reassigned. You report something that wasn't supposed to exist, you get labeled confused. But I knew I wasn't. 2 nights later, I found something strange in my email. No subject, no sender, just a blank message with one attachment. A screenshot. It was from the audio converter, a freeze frame from the tape's metadata. The file name said judge_K_playback_RE vision _3 final way. I stared at it for a long time. Someone had seen what I saw, maybe even listened. Maybe they were trying to help, or maybe they were warning me. I clicked to download the attachment. It had already expired. For the next few days, I kept thinking about the words that were said, the way he said trial 7, like it had already happened, like there were 6 others before it. And every time I looked at my ID badge, plain plastic clipped to my chest, I remembered that man's voice, that heavy, haunted voice. He didn't say he regretted it. He said I had to call him sir. And now I couldn't stop wondering, what kind of courtroom makes a judge say that Unit 4 N is not on the map? Name's Del, short for Delano, but nobody's called me that since middle school. I'm 38, been doing freelance IT security work for close to 15 years now, mostly government contracts, the kind of gigs that come with paperwork thicker than the Bible, and a badge that gets you through doors most people don't even know exist. I don't ask too many questions, never have. I go where they tell me, plug in what they say, update the firmware, run diagnostics, collect my invoice, and dip. That's the rhythm. Clean, quiet, detached. MDC Brooklyn was just another site on the checklist. Got the contract through a third-party firm that specializes in corrections tech. They'd flagged inconsistencies in the surveillance logs, motion pings that weren't matching the archived video footage. A common enough glitch, usually firmware version gets too old, data mismatches, no big deal. So they brought me in to do a full sweep, patch it up, run some backups. The assignment ticket came with a printed layout, floor plans, zones, access points. One zone stuck out, Unit 4N. Now I've worked with the MDC system before and I know the standard setup. You've got housing units labeled by floor and wing, north, south, west. But this one, 4N? That wasn't on any of the public blueprints. It wasn't even in the internal maintenance directory. Yet it had its own dedicated switch node. Active, live. I ran a quick ping to the 4N node from the remote dashboard and got a response. Strong signal, 8 active cameras, time-stamped events going back weeks, movement logs, temperature readings, even inmate IDs, though most were masked behind placeholder numbers like 01N or 038N. So I pack my gear, print the work ticket, and head to the site. Check-in at MDC is always a chore. You pass through 3 scanners, empty your pockets twice, then sign a document saying if anything happens to you inside, it's not their fault. Standard procedure. The CO at the front desk scans my badge and reads through my ticket. He frowns. Unit 4N? That's not part of the maintenance rotation. I point to the printed assignment. Says right here, priority firmware upgrade on the 4N surveillance loop. Cameras 38 through 46. He squints, then types something into his terminal. After a long pause, he nods, but I can tell he's uncomfortable. Okay, I guess you're cleared. They'll send a float to escort you down. A lanky guard named Powers shows up, real jittery type, wears his uniform like it's too big for him. Doesn't say much on the walk to the lower levels. Just hums tunelessly and occasionally clears his throat, like he's trying to build up the nerve to talk. We take a service elevator down to the 3rd sublevel. The lights get dimmer the deeper we go. Paint flakes off the ceiling. I can hear water dripping somewhere. Always the damn water in these places. At the T-junction, Powers stops and gestures down a side hall. Your panel's at the end, left side. Junction F. Don't wander. Copy that, I say, keeping it light. Be in and out. The hallway smells like burnt dust and recycled air. I reach the panel and start logging into the switch. Takes a minute for the diagnostics to load. But when they do, the 4N loop lights up bright green. Live feed. 8 cameras. When plugged in, it floats away just as quickly as it had come, like it held its breath. I pour in a live feed. 8 cameras. I open one window. What I see doesn't make sense. It's a dorm, not like the ones I've seen before. No standard 2-man cells or bunk rows. This room is more open, like a hybrid between solitary and rec. There are no bars, no numbers on the beds. The walls are soft gray like soundproofing foam. And in the center of the room, pacing like a man possessed, is Sean Combs. He's wearing a plain white t-shirt. His hair's grown out a bit, eyes heavy like he hasn't slept in days. He walks in a square 4 steps. Turn, 4 steps, turn. Every so often he mumbles something. I can't make out the words. There's no audio on this loop. I switch to another feed. Now he's sitting on the bed, hunched forward, hands clasped like he's in prayer. Except he's not praying. His lips are moving. He says something again. Still no sound. Then he looks up directly at the camera and speaks slowly, clearly. To Judge K. We're not done. I freeze. There's no Judge K on the public case. I've seen the court documents. His trial judge is Subramanian. But this felt like something different. Like the camera wasn't for security, like it was a messenger. Before I can record anything, the screen flickers. Static, then black. I tap the side of the console, refresh the feed. Nothing. Moment later, I hear footsteps behind me. Heavy boots. I turn. It's not Powers. This guy's bigger. Clean uniform, radio clipped high on his shoulder. He looks at me like I've pissed on the floor. You're in the wrong corridor, technician. You've finished your work. I start to speak, but he cuts me off with a slight nod toward the exit. I pack my gear. He escorts me all the way to the elevator without another word. By the time I reach the surface, Powers is gone. The guy at the checkout desk scans my ID and barely glances at me. "You're clear," he says. I get back home just after 8 p.m. My laptop's still open from the night before. I plug in my diagnostic drive to upload the firmware report. Just routine. Except there's a folder I didn't put there. Labeled RView4N. Encrypted. Password protected. But whoever left it made it easy. The password was my badge number. Inside, 8 video files. Low-res, choppy, probably grabbed from the system buffer before the feeds cut, each one no longer than 30 seconds. I open the first. Diddy again, same room. He's walking in slow circles, whispering something to himself. Second file, he's lying down, eyes open, lips moving. NC, not proper. Third file, he stares at the camera again. El Judge K. Fourth file. There's another man in the frame, face blurred, wearing gloves, sitting on a stool with a clipboard. They never speak, but the man nods once, then disappears out of frame. The rest of the videos are distorted, glitchy. One shows a wall covered in index cards. Each one says the same thing. Release, review, return. I don't know what the hell I saw. I don't know why it was saved to my drive. I tried to contact my handler at the contracting agency the next morning. Voicemail. Then auto reply. Then nothing. Later that day, I got an email from a different sender. One I didn't recognize. Thank you for your work on 3N and 5S. Future updates to 4N will not be required. No mention of the files. No mention of Diddy. No payment confirmation. I looked back at my ticket. It was now archived under a new label. Unassigned sector. The files disappeared from my laptop the next day. Just gone. But that image of him, eyes locked on mine through that camera, hasn't left my head since. Then I can still hear it sometimes, like a whisper buried in static. We're not done. Chapter 3. The redacted testimony of a janitor named Miles. My name is Carla Vallon, Internal Affairs, Bureau of Federal Corrections. I've been doing this job for 16 years, and most of it has been spent sitting in airless rooms reading other people's regrets. Guards who cracked under pressure, nurses who sold pills through food carts, contractors who disappeared with classified footage. My job isn't to arrest. It's not even really to punish. It's to understand where the holes are, who's leaking, who's listening when they shouldn't be. MDC Brooklyn has always been a headache. The facility's old bones don't cooperate with the modern systems. Surveillance goes dark randomly. Data scrambles during transfers, and the walls are too thick for clean radio. And the people, well, the people break down faster than the tech. But this last quarter, something shifted. 3 separate inmates filed complaints about night disturbances. They claimed someone was visiting one of the dorm units in the early hours. Someone without a CO badge, without a name. One inmate said he saw a man in a white t-shirt whispering to himself by the ice machine. Another claimed the hallway lights flickered every night at 3:03 a.m. The warden dismissed all of them, said they were playing copycat. But then Officer Granger went out on mental health leave, full shutdown. He left mid-shift without logging out. When they found him 2 hours later, he was sitting in his car with the engine off and all 4 windows rolled up, holding his own badge like it was a piece of trash. In his psych evaluation, Granger said only one clear sentence: "They're rehearsing down there. They think we can't see it." That was enough to trigger a quiet IA probe. I was assigned to review all recent staff depositions from units that overlapped with the motion sensor failures. Took me 2 full days to scrub through most of the fluff. Arguments over meal rotations, grievances about broken vending machines, paranoia over supposed air quality. But one file stopped me cold. The position: FF2913, staff role, custodial. Name: Miles Jenkins. Shift: night janitor. 14 pages long, 13 redacted. I blinked, flipped through the digital scan again, paragraph after paragraph covered with black blocks. Not the usual redaction codes either. No markings, no context, just darkness. Only one line survived, sitting alone on page 12. It had 3 visitors that weren't logged. One of them had no face. I sat back in my chair. No face. At first I thought it was figurative, maybe an informant using slang, maybe a masked visitor or someone with a hood. But even then, who were the other 2? Who's he? I pulled up Miles' personnel record. Hired 2021, prior experience in sanitation, clean file. A few minor write-ups for lateness, lived alone, no criminal history. Then I opened his resignation letter, filed the day after his testimony. It wasn't addressed to HR. It wasn't even formatted like a letter, just a page with this single line. When Judge K said rehearse, I thought he meant trial. I didn't know he meant everything. I stopped reading for a full minute. Judge K, not on any current docket, not involved in any public Diddy proceeding. And yet here was his name, buried in a janitor's letter, connected to a concept that kept surfacing again and again. Playback, rehearsal, script. I ran a quick cross-check. Judge K returned no match in our system. Not by last name, not by docket nickname, not by clearance code. Not for this facility, not for this district. It was as if he'd never existed. But the language in Miles' resignation haunted me. Not trial, everything. I flagged the testimony for deeper review and requested a visit to Miles' last known address, a 3rd-floor walk-up in Burham Hill. Nothing fancy, rent controlled, curtains drawn. The property manager let me in. The apartment was stripped, no furniture, no dishes, not even dust. The fridge was unplugged, the power meter read 0 usage for 9 days. I thought he just moved, the manager said. He was real polite, always quiet, carried a mop home with him, even on weekends. Said he didn't trust the one they gave him. There was no forwarding address, no transfer request, no moving company had been logged through the building's security system, no neighbor remembered seeing anyone help him pack. On my way out, I stood across the street, just staring at the windows. I don't know why. Something about the stillness didn't feel natural. The whole building had a way of holding its breath. Then I saw it. Across the street, 2 shops down, was a shuttered bookstore, windows covered in brown paper, closed since the pandemic by the look of it. But one pane wasn't covered, and in the reflection, faint and half-lit by the amber street lamp above, I saw a figure. Male, late 50s, tall, wearing blue janitor overalls, and holding a mop. He didn't move, just stood there, watching the window. Other stories. Yuck. I spun around, expecting to see him across the street. There was no one there. I checked the reflection again. Later that night, I reopened the deposition file, looking for anything, any phrase, any margin note, any clue. One hidden annotation caught my eye, not visible in the scan preview, embedded in the file metadata, like a digital sticky note. It was a quote, no author. You cannot watch what was rehearsed without becoming part of it. I stared at it until the words started to feel like a chant. Part of me wanted to close the case then and there, mark it as inconclusive, corrupted testimony, staff psych decline, standard fallback. But I didn't, because something was happening in MDC Brooklyn, something just outside the frame. I could feel it now, in the way the testimonies vanished, in the way the building rearranged itself in people's memories. And I kept hearing the words, not trial, everything. Chapter 4. Trial 7 was never about guilt. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the archive floors. That's where they kept the frozen cases, The sealed stuff, the dismissed stuff, the stuff no one ever wanted to explain. But I'd finished my assigned brief ahead of deadline, and rather than stare at coffee-stained contracts for another hour, I figured I'd offer to help Susan with backlog scanning. She was drowning in federal sentencing cases, most of them older than me. I'm Brianna, by the way, just a junior paralegal at the time. I didn't even have a bar card yet. I was 2 years out of undergrad and still believed I might actually do something with a legal career. But that day was the start of something that took that belief and hollowed it out from the inside. The file was buried halfway down a milk crate full of 201722020 case folders, most of them already digitized. At first glance, it didn't even look like a case file. No manila folder, no binder clip, just a stack of loose papers held together by a single black ribbon, the kind you'd see on ceremonial documents. The top sheet didn't list a docket number, just a title, Trial 7. 7. No defendant name, no prosecutor, just a motion date, a timestamp, and 3 initials, K.A. I flipped through the pages, redacted lines, page numbers missing, but a few names stood out. Judge K's signature on 2 separate motions, both marked emergency bench approval with a classification code I didn't recognize, RH46EPT. I stopped. See, every federal trial has some kind of transparency track, even sealed cases. Chain of custody, attendance logs, bail conditions. But this was different. There was no record of arraignment, no signed order for closed doors, no jury summons, no clerk of court signature. It was like the case had slipped through a back door in the building and never came out. Out of habit, more than anything, I logged into the court's internal archive terminal and typed in the timestamp listed on the motion. May 3, 2020, 11:12 a.m. If the courtroom was in use, there'd be footage. There was. Courtroom 6B, audio disabled, camera perched in the back corner, angled toward the bench. The room was mostly empty. No bailiff, no stenographer. Just 2 men seated at the front, one in a plain black suit, couldn't see his face, and the other in a beige jumpsuit with hands folded in front of him. Without the jumpsuit, the meeting ran on pure. Even with the grainy footage, I recognized him. Sean Combs. 5 years ago. In that room. He wasn't listed in any federal trial. From 2020, no sealed hearings, no indictments, nothing. But there he was, calm, composed, staring forward like he was listening to a sermon instead of standing trial. Behind him, a woman sat with her head bowed. Her mouth was moving, quietly, repetitively. Her hands clutched a tissue shredded and balled in her fist. She didn't look up once, and yet she was the only one who seemed to be in pain. I skipped forward in the footage. The judge, presumably Judge K, spoke for a moment, reading from a page. Then he stepped down from the bench. That never happens in federal court, ever. He walked around the defense table, paused in front of Diddy, didn't speak, didn't gesture. And then from the right corner of the room, another figure entered. A woman, robed, wearing a small metallic badge. They zoomed in on the paused frame. The badge read, 46. She didn't sit. She didn't speak. She stood in the corner like a witness, like someone who already knew the outcome. Her presence didn't disturb the room. It confirmed it. She was there not to judge, but to observe. I felt cold watching it, the kind of cold you feel when a room forgets it's being watched. At 11:32 a.m., the feed glitched. Just one frame lost, then another. Then the whole screen blinked off. Footage unavailable. That was the system's message when the clip ended. I tried refreshing, downloading. I even pulled the metadata logs. All gone, except for one still image I'd screen capped seconds before the glitch. I emailed it to myself immediately, labeled it Personal Reference TR7. I didn't want to forget what I'd seen, and I knew by the next day the system would bury it. In the image, you could clearly make out the table in front of Diddy. A single piece of paper sat near his elbow. No case file, no court transcript, just one handwritten phrase. Reclaim yourself, rehearse the silence. I didn't know what it meant, not then, but it felt heavy, like a code I wasn't meant to hear. I printed the still and brought it, along with a summary of the case file, to my supervisor, Alan. He was a lifer, been with the firm since Clinton. When I laid out the pages on his desk, his face changed. He didn't get angry. He didn't ask why I was down in the archives. He just said, "Where did you find this?" Grade F-17. It was unlabeled. Did anyone else see it? Nah, just me. He stared at the image for a long moment, then slid it back to me. You need to delete the digital copy. Alan, this is a sealed federal. I'm serious. There are cases you don't dig into. This is one of them. But it's a closed loop. There's no record of arraignment, no clerk notes, and that badge, what the hell is Trial 7? He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. You ever wonder why some people get settlements without trials? Why certain names never make the docket? He didn't answer. Delete the image, he said again. Forget the case. It was closed before you found it. The next morning I was moved to a different team. No explanation. All my court database access was revoked. They said it was a temporary security update. The image I saved, gone from my email. The folder on my drive, corrupted. Only the printout survived. I kept it in my desk drawer until the day I quit. And even now, 5 years later, I still see that slip of paper in my dreams. Reclaim yourself. Rehearse the silence. And I can't help but think that wasn't a command for him. It was for us. Chapter 5. They let the victims watch. They told us this room was for our protection. That was the phrase the liaison used. For your protection. Not safety, not privacy. Protection. Like we were fragile. Like we'd break if we saw him up close again. Like the 4 inches of plexiglass and a wall full of cables between us and that courtroom would stop whatever needed stopping. My name's Ava. I don't use my last name anymore. I changed it 2 years ago after the settlement. They told me I could start fresh. That's what they say when you've signed your name on paper thick enough to bury your past. They give you a check and a therapist and a phone number that redirects every 6 months. I took the deal. I was tired. I was 25 and already tired. They flew me out here last week. Quiet flight, no press. I had to stay at a second-tier hotel in Midtown with blackout curtains that didn't quite close. The room smelled like old soap and carpet glue. The court had arranged everything. Said I was being brought in as a consulted survivor. Said I could choose to attend the trial via feed from a special viewing room. They never said why it had to be that way. They didn't need to. Because I knew what would happen if I saw him in person, and I knew what he would do if he saw me. The viewing room was 1 floor above the main courtroom. It looked like an old jury deliberation room that had been converted last minute. The walls were scuffed, the windows blacked out with thick screens, and there was only 1 monitor, a flat panel bolted into the wall in front of 3 plastic chairs, not leather, not even cushion. Just gray plastic like we were children being punished in a principal's office. Yeah, odd time. There were 2 other women in the room. I recognized one of them, even though I didn't know her name. We'd been in the same apartment once, years ago, on one of those nights you try not to remember. The 3rd girl looked even younger than I had been. Wide-eyed, too still. She kept her hands folded in her lap like she was trying not to exist. None of us talked, not at first. The court officer stationed at the door gave us bottled water and told us how the feed worked. Live, but with a 30-second delay, he said. No audio. Courtroom mics are restricted to gallery and clerk use only. You're here for emotional closure. That phrase again, emotional closure. Like grief had a checkout counter. Then he locked the door from the outside. The screen blinked on. There he was. Same face, a little grayer now, but the same calm mouth, same quiet arrogance behind the eyes. He wore a navy suit, wrinkle-free, hands folded neatly on the table, no cuffs, no chains, like he was at a meeting. The judge spoke. We couldn't hear him. A lawyer stood and gestured. We couldn't hear her either. Then Diddy looked up, directly at the camera, at us, and his lips moved. Not a lot, just enough. The girl next to me gasped. The youngest one covered her mouth with both hands and bent forward, retching into her lap. There was no sound, but we heard it anyway. Not with our ears, in our bones. I couldn't explain it. I still can't. It was like the words vibrated through the screen and settled behind our ribs, like he was saying them at us, not just into the courtroom. I remember he made them about... The second woman muttered. He's saying it again. I turned to her. What do you mean, again? She didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the screen. The camera angle changed. Court staff shuffled paperwork. A lawyer approached the bench. The feed looked so normal, so procedural. But every time the camera lingered on his face, he would do it again. That subtle movement of the mouth. 3 words. Each time, the air in the room got heavier. I started sweating, not just nervous sweat, something deeper, like the room itself was shrinking around us, like the walls were starting to absorb sound. The third time he said it, the youngest girl clawed her arm, deep, fingernails scraping in circles just above her elbow, where the skin was already thin. She didn't make a sound, just rocked. I stood up, walked to the door, and knocked. The court officer opened it halfway. He didn't look surprised. Keep saying something, I said. Into the camera. We need the audio. Something's wrong. He nodded like he'd heard it before. That's just the playback, he said. You don't have to listen this time. I blinked. This time? He didn't answer, just closed the door. Back at my chair, the screen shifted again. He wasn't speaking now, just staring. Not at the judge, not at the lawyer. The other 2 women had stopped moving entirely, like statues. Their eyes were open, but I could tell some part of them had checked out, gone somewhere, quieter. I pressed my hand to my own chest, trying to calm my breathing. My heart was thudding like a warning bell. On the table in front of Diddy was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. He didn't touch it, but the camera zoomed in just enough for us to see the edge of the top line. I knew those words. Reclaim yourself. The rest was cropped, but I remembered. Rehearse the silence. This wasn't for the court. It wasn't about the charges, the motions, the witnesses. It was a performance. And we were the audience, the ones who'd seen it all before, the ones he knew would watch again, not out of choice, out of compulsion. The thing about trauma is, sometimes it loops, sometimes your mind replays it like a movie, trying to rewrite the ending. And sometimes when the man who hurt you gets a stage, he knows exactly what to say, even if no one else hears it, even if it's not really said at all. That night, back in my hotel, I checked under the bed. I unplugged the TV. I covered the small blinking light on the smoke detector, not because I thought he was watching, because I didn't know who was. The next morning, they told me I'd fulfilled my appearance requirement, that I could return home, that a counselor would follow up. I didn't speak during the exit interview. I didn't sign the form they gave me. I just wrote one sentence on the back of the waiver. He's still rehearsing. I left the pen on the desk and walked out without looking back. But even now, sometimes when I close my eyes, I still hear him. Not with my ears, with whatever part of me never really left that room. Chapter 6, The Judge's Own Confession. If anyone ever hears this, I want you to know I was real. I'm not speaking this for redemption. I'm not confessing out of guilt. I don't even know if what I'm saying qualifies as testimony. I suppose I just need to mark the record before someone erases it again, because that's what they do here. Scrub it clean, rewrite it like it never happened. I've been on the bench for 20 years, Southern District. Federal appointments. You learn quickly which cases come with cameras and which come with silence. Some trials are about verdicts. Some are about spectacle. But a few, very few, are rehearsals. That's the word they used the first time I saw it written in a sealed directive. Rehearsal. I didn't understand it then, thought it was poetic language, bureaucratic metaphor, a way to say we're helping people process trauma. But that wasn't it, not even close. They called it the playback doctrine. I remember the day it started, not officially, not with a vote or a hearing. It started with a manila envelope placed on my bench. No return address, no seal. Inside, a memo stamped RE 46 and a case file with no name, just the number 7. Trial 7. The defendant wasn't listed. The charges weren't listed. But the instructions were clear. I was to preside. No jury, no press, no public record. The proceeding would be closed loop, meaning it could not be cited in any future ruling. Legally, it wouldn't exist. I should have refused, should have asked questions, but I was younger then, ambitious, and naive enough to think I'd been chosen for my clarity. The man they brought in that day wore his arrogance like a tailored coat. He didn't fidget, didn't ask about charges, just smiled. John Combs, not Diddy, not Puff. He introduced himself to the bailiff as Sean, and when he sat at the table, he didn't look at me. He looked at the camera mounted just above the door, as if it was an old friend. There was no formal reading of charges, just a page I was instructed to sign. It said, non-punitive adjudication. I didn't know what that meant. No one does, really. It means a sentence that doesn't carry consequence, only rehearsal. The woman who sat behind him. We never spoke her name. She cried without making a sound. Her hands were wrapped in cloth, like she was still trying to hide what he'd done, and she kept whispering. I couldn't hear what, but her lips never stopped moving, like a loop she couldn't break. At one point, Sean turned to her, smiled, said something I couldn't hear. She flinched. I made a note to request audio enhancement. That note disappeared from the file the next day. There was another person in the room, a second judge or something close. She stood in the corner, black robe, silver badge, just the number 46. She didn't speak, didn't sit, just watched. The way a mirror watches. I was told afterward that the trial had been successful, that the emotional script had been properly imprinted, that the defendant had agreed to terms of rehearsal and reclamation. That was the word they used, reclamation, not guilt, not punishment. He asked for the robe. I didn't understand what he meant at first. I thought he wanted leniency, a symbolic gesture, but he wasn't asking for mercy. He was asking for membership, and they gave it to him. That's when I started to see it, not just in his case, in others, names you'd recognize, men who should have faced decades. Instead, their cases vanished into sealed boxes, their victims given hush settlements. The public told to move on, because justice had been rehearsed. That was the lie they sold us. Playback doctrine is real. It's not a metaphor. It's a procedural framework built off the idea that trauma can be socially neutralized by repetition. That if we stage it enough times, in courtrooms, in media, in quiet settlements, we can drain it of power. But all it does is teach us to look away. That's what I can't live with. Not the cases, not the names, but the way we were told to sit still while it happened, to call it healing, to call it closure. The playback file is sealed beneath the courthouse. They keep it on analog media, not digital, cassette tapes, VHS, film reels. Because analog leaves no metadata trail, no cloud storage, just silence unless someone plays it. 7. And now, I know they'll come for this too. I found a copy of the transcript from Trial 7 in my desk drawer last week. I didn't put it there. It wasn't printed on our machines. It had my signature, but the ink smelled like rust. Someone wants me to remember. Someone wants me to say it out loud. So here it is. He officiated a trial where no guilt was spoken, where no punishment was given, only performance, only playback. And when I asked why it had to happen again, they said, because the culture needs to be reminded how to forget. I'm recording this because my memory is starting to fray. Because every time I close my eyes, I see that courtroom, not the one with lights and flags, but the one underneath it, the cold one. The one where the victims sit behind glass and are told they're healing. But I'm not healing, and I don't think they are either. They'll erase this. I know they will. They always do. But if someone finds the audio, tell them I was real. Tell them I did speak. Chapter 7. The silence was scheduled. I hadn't heard that name in months. It's 17, but when I opened the package that morning and saw it stamped across the top of the transcript in blocky black letters, something in my stomach shifted. Like I'd swallowed a stone. No return address, no postage date, just a flat, manila envelope on my doorstep, resting like it belonged there. I stood holding it for what felt like a long time before I even opened it. I live alone, third floor walk-up, no camera, no doorman. No one should have been able to leave it without me noticing. And yet, there it was. Crisp, clean, waiting. I peeled the flap open. Inside was a single document, sealed with a red adhesive tab, the kind we used to see on classified testimony packets at the archive. That same paper slightly off-white, with a texture like it had been photocopied too many times and folded too tight. Across the front, playback review, viewer, 17. My name was on the first page. Not my full name, just Mira V. And then written underneath in smaller text, qualified for scheduled rehearsal. Intake prepared. I didn't remember applying for anything. I hadn't submitted forms, clicked links, said yes to any sort of process. And yet the script spoke to me like I was already in it, already cast. I sat down on my kitchen floor with the packet, didn't even make it to the table. The second page was a schedule, a date and time highlighted. Playback scheduled. Friday, 7:00 p.m. Today, the next line listed an address I didn't recognize, but the street was 2 blocks from my old office at the archive, a location that wasn't listed on any public city maps. I should have stopped reading, but then came the part that made my skin prickle. A decision box. It read, upon entry, viewer 17 will be asked to choose. A. Rehearse the silence. B. Broadcast the file and vanish. That was it. No explanation, no definitions, just pick a path. What did it mean to rehearse, to vanish? Where would I go? Who would see it? Who would want to? I closed the packet. My hands were shaking. That's when I noticed my coat on the chair. It looked the same as always. Worn, navy blue, pockets slightly ripped on the inside, but it felt heavier than usual. I reached in, and I pulled out a folded piece of fabric, a robe. Not thick, not ceremonial, just a plain gray cloth with a subtle embroidered line across the collar, a shape I couldn't place at first. 3 interlocking circles. I hadn't bought it. I didn't know where it came from, but it smelled faintly of cedar and static, like it had been stored in a dark room full of old tapes. I didn't remember putting it there. I didn't remember owning it. But it was mine now. I sat for a long time after that, thinking, trying to remember things I hadn't thought about since I'd been reassigned. Like that voice on the tape, the judge's voice, the one that said I had to call him sir. The voice that wasn't meant to be heard, except I had heard it, and now apparently that meant something. I made tea without tasting it, let the day pass like fog, checked the time every hour, and told myself I wouldn't go. At 6:45, I was already walking. The address led me to a plain concrete building tucked between 2 shuttered storefronts. The door was unmarked, no buzzer, just a brass handle and a small plaque above it with a number 17. Inside, the hallway was narrow, dim, the kind of light that doesn't cast shadows, just dulls everything down to gray. At the end of the hall, a door was already open. Behind it, a room I knew before I stepped inside. The playback room. It looked like a jury deliberation space, same as the one Ava described in her deposition. 3 chairs, a single monitor mounted to the wall, a desk with a button marked playback, and on the wall behind the screen, printed in faded ink, was the phrase I'd seen on the transcript still frame from months ago. Reclaim yourself. Rehearse the silence. On the chair in the middle sat a tablet. It displayed 2 buttons. A rehearse. Broadcast. No context, no timer, no guidance. I stood there a long time, and slowly things started coming back. That hallway with the flickering lights outside the archive, had I seen that before? The name tag a clerk left behind on my desk, had it said K? That one night I dreamed of static pouring out of the server room vents and voices whispering my name in the hum. Was that a dream? Or had I been here before? Was this a loop? Was I part of it? I don't know how long I sat there, staring at those buttons. I only know that when I finally reached out, my hand didn't shake. Because maybe this was never about guilt. Maybe it was never about punishment. Maybe it was always just about what you do when you're told the silence is scheduled. And whether you choose to follow the script or write a new one, the final word wasn't spoken. It was transferred. The room is not listed on any official blueprint. It sits beneath the lowest sublevel of MDC Brooklyn, behind a reinforced bulkhead that once led to storage for broken plumbing units. The door no longer bears a number. Its name has been redacted in every file. The only thing that marks its presence is a cold draft that hums beneath the threshold like a breath held too long. Inside the chamber, a man sits. He is not restrained. He is not cuffed. He has not spoken in hours. He is dressed in soft gray, loose, unmarked. No prison ID, no bar-coded badge, just a robe. Across from him, a blank screen waits. The man is known to the world by many names: Diddy, Combs, Puff, Sean. But in this room, he is not known. He is rehearsed. A low mechanical click echoes from the ceiling. The screen buzzes to life. No menu, no controls, just a woman's face. Mira. She is not reading from a script. Not anymore. She is reciting. Her eyes do not shift. Her tone does not waver. She speaks as though the words were placed in her chest long ago, waiting for this room, this moment to be pulled out again. Around the perimeter of the chamber, a long steel table curves into a crescent. Upon it sit 46 identical folders. Each folder bears a number, a date, a name. None of them are opened. Not yet. A faint speaker crackles overhead. A voice loops, soft, measured, familiar. I officiated a trial where no guilt was spoken, where no punishment was given, only performance, only playback. The voice of Judge K, stripped from his last recording, cleaned, processed, now fed to a neurorehabilitation algorithm labeled Protocol REH46 Playback 1. The court never approved it, no medical board reviewed it, but it runs now. It runs silently, through the walls, through the floors, through the pulses of the men inside. On the screen, Mira's voice pauses. In the chamber, a drawer beneath the table opens with a hiss. The man calms, does not move at first. Then slowly he reaches in and retrieves the folder marked with today's date. His hands do not tremble. He opens it. Inside is not paper, not a transcript, not a confession. Just a mirror, polished, cold, cut into the exact shape of the courtroom bench's front plate. He stares at it. His face stares back. The speaker above hums to life once more. You rehearsed it. You played your part. Now someone else will watch. The screen cuts to static. The chamber does not blink. In the adjacent room, another inmate receives a folder, and another. Some of them pause. Some of them cry. Some of them whisper names they thought they'd forgotten. In one cell, a man laughs. In another, a man covers the mirror with his bedsheet and refuses to speak again. But the playback continues. Across the facility, strange motions are logged in units that don't appear on official records. 4N subsection V holding cell K. Codes flicker across secure terminals. Viewer 21, confirmed. Playback ready. Echo validated. There are no officers assigned to these wings, only witnesses. In the surveillance room, a technician watches the monitors cycle through static and light. On camera 3, a janitor holds a mop, unmoving, staring directly into the lens. The technician clicks to another feed. When he returns, the janitor is gone. In the warden's office, a sealed envelope waits on the desk. He hasn't opened it. He already knows what's inside. The playback doctrine is not a system of punishment. It does not exist to correct. It does not seek justice. It seeks rehearsal. Trauma turned cyclical. Memory turned environment. In the facility, it is no longer a prison. It is a chamber of echoes, where every silence is assigned, and every verdict is transferred.